In this video I'm going to be looking at my choice of pro lenses for studio, portrait and people work. Join me. Roll titles. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James at Micro Four Thirds Guy with you once again, and this is a video which has been made for my Patreon channel. So if you're watching on Patreon, good to see you. If you're not watching it on Patreon, you could have seen this video 2 weeks ago because it's been up there for the last fortnight, but now you'll see it on YouTube. And if you want to become a Patreon member, there's a little link below in the comments on this, and also there's a way, if you don't want to become a patron, where you can support the channel with either super thanks or with a PayPal donation if you want to help support the channel. Anyway, in today's video I'm going to be looking at my choice of professional lenses for portrait, studio and general people work. And it's a little bit different to what I was doing on my budget ones. On the budget ones I'm going to follow primes. This one I'm mainly going towards zooms, and that may sound a little bit topsy-turvy, but the quality of the pro level zooms that we got are absolutely outstanding. And there's a couple of choices on that. But the good thing about a pro level zoom, it gives you all the advantages of the prime lenses without having to change them. You can instantly change your shot, and you've still got a reasonably good aperture on them to be able to go forward. So my first choice, well, the first choice is a zoom lens, and this is the zoom lens which is going to be able to do most of what I wanted to do. It'll go from wide angle so I can get full body shots. And if you haven't seen the budget lens video, then it's maybe worth watching it. There'll be a link above. But when I'm doing shots, I'm looking towards avoiding, I just like distortion when I'm looking at people. I like to have people so that they look like people rather than anything else. There was a trend over the last few years when people were taking selfies on the mobile phones, where you got a very wide angle lens, very close in, and you get that duck pout almost look with a very narrow face and a long head, and I really dislike that. I like people to look like people. So I need to have lenses which won't distort. So my first choice on this, and probably the lens that I would use 99% of the time if I was using a pro lens on Micro Four Thirds to do any of my portrait work, would be the Olympus 12-40 f2.8. I think it is an absolutely fantastic, really fantastic lens. The f2.8 will get you some really nice shallow bokeh if you're doing shots, but it also gives you really good low light capability. I would avoid going down as far as 12. I tend to stick to about 17, 18 mil has been my minimum. When you start getting below that, you're starting to get some of those distortions set in. You can take photographs, especially full body photographs, where you've got somebody sitting down in a nice background and you want to get the whole of the body and a bit of the background in. You can get away with those without too much distortion, but as soon as you get too close in or too obtuse an angle to where they're sitting, you'll find that you start getting some of these distortions set in. They're not so good. So I tend to avoid going lower than 17 mil on most shots. It's like any rule, it's not hard and fast. You'll find that there's a perfect shot which maybe was taken at 12. Don't tell me in the comments about that. I know that that's the case, but as a general rule I keep above 17 mil. I also generally don't tend to shoot, with my shooting style, super narrow depth of field. I like to have it opened out a little bit to about f4, f5.6, maybe f6.3, so that I'm not getting the sort of eyes in focus but the tip of the nose out and the back of the head out of focus. That's not a shot I particularly like. It may be a shot that you do, but it's not something I particularly like to do. So I tend to be shooting around about the f4 to f6.3 on most of these. If I'm doing studio work, I'll be using probably strobes or speed lights, and I'll be able to control the lights. So I'll usually have my ISO on all these shots as low as possible. Usually at the native 200 ISO on Micro Four Thirds cameras, if I can do that, because using artificial light gives you the ability to give as much light or as small amount of light as you want, and have the aperture set to what you want it to be. So that's what I tend to do. If I'm outside, I still try and go for the lowest aperture I possibly can, because I'm getting the best quality, the lowest noise, the best possible quality from the camera. The native ISO is the best that the camera can put out. I don't tend to go for the extended range. I can get it down to an ISO of 50 on it, but it doesn't really give me much advantage because then it's been done in processor. So I tend to stick to the native ISO as much as possible. Now, of course, the problem with outside is that you can't really control the light. So quite often what I will do is I'll use a speed light with a small reflector if I'm on my own, or I'll set a small lighting stand up and use a speed light just to get a bit of fill on there. But if it is particularly dark, you can be aware that you have to increase your ISO slightly to be able to get it come in. But unlike on the event photography where I said, well, just let it run its own course, to me, I would actually try and keep it as low as possible deliberately, set it to a manual setting, and get as low as possible for the best possible quality I can. The f2.8 lens with the 12 to 40 is going to give you that really great extra little bit of push. Now, that's going to cause some controversy as well, because I've probably just alienated all my Leica viewers. So, I'll come back to you in a few moments. Keep watching, Leica viewers, because I've got something in store for your lenses. So my next lens on that, well, we've effectively hit the 24 to 80mm range on a full frame camera. So for me, I've covered 3 of the lenses that I would have used on my budget ones. I chose the 17, the 45 and the 60mm. I'm not quite getting the 60 on this, and in this case I would say that I would probably be skipping the 60mm, and for the medium to telephoto to get the really tight headshots, I would be going, I think I'd be pushing probably to get the 75mm f1.8 prime from Olympus. It's just an unbelievably beautiful lens. It is razor sharp. That can be a disadvantage when you're taking portraits, of course, because modern lenses do tend to be a little bit too sharp for me, and I have to put a little bit of artificial lessening of the softening, I should say, of the images quite often when I'm taking facial shots. However, by having that super sharpness gives you the option to go both ways, and I really do think that the Olympus 75mm f1.8 is just an unbelievable lens. It's not the cheapest lens and it's not the smallest lens on the market, but the quality of results are absolutely fantastic, and that's getting you into that sort of medium telephoto side. So if you're going to the tight headshots, it's still giving you the ability to be at a reasonable distance from your subject. Now, why I choose lenses when it comes to portraiture isn't so much the lens focal length per se. What I'm looking for is for a good working relationship between me and the person I'm taking the photographs of. I could take most photographs with a 75mm f1.8. The problem is, to take a full body shot with that, I'd be over beside the houses behind me. It's, you know, it's ridiculous. And you're having to shout to give them instructions how you want them to pose or how you want them to look in the shot. So that's unworkable. Similarly, if I'm using a 17mm lens for a headshot, I'm going to be almost sitting on top of the lens. I'm going to be right up there with the person and right in the personal space. And that intimidates people who are models. Most people aren't professional models that we're taking photographs of, and they can be very intimidating in front of the camera. Now, I usually work for between a 6 and 8 foot distance in front. I find that that's easy to communicate. You're not having to shout. You still see what the facial, what the eyes are saying. You can communicate in various ways. And it's intimate enough for that, but it's also distant enough that you're not in their personal space. And also, as a photographer, it gives you the ability to have some working room yourself. You're not feeling cramped in. It gives you the opportunity to get the lights where you want them easily enough if you're using strobes. So, as I say, the 12 to 40 f2.8 is just a brilliant lens for that, and the 75mm f1.8, both from Olympus, I would say is a perfect working setup. Of course, it can be that you want different things on that, and we can get into different lenses as well. So if we're going to go into the primes, although I personally probably wouldn't be using these, you're getting into things like the f1.2 primes, the 17mm, the 25mm, and the 45mm from Olympus. Absolutely superb lenses, all of them, but you need a decent amount of dosh to be able to go and get them. They are not cheap, and they start getting quite large. They're large lenses on there, and again, with some of the Micro Four Thirds lenses, the small nature of the camera and the lens again tends to be a little bit less intimidating for the models. However, if you really want that super narrow bokeh, get yourself some of the f1.2 lenses from Olympus. Also, you've got the same lenses available from Lumix. You get the f1.2 or the f1.4 lenses when you get into Lumix lenses. Again, absolutely superb lenses. I tend to avoid the f1.8 lenses to a degree from Lumix, except the 42.5 is just a wonderful lens. but I find that the focal lengths available on the rest of the primes, the Olympus beats them slightly. That's on the budget side. On the pro side, using those, I really don't differentiate between the Olympus and the Lumix. I think it's a case of have a look at the lens, see which fits your bill best. There really is so little between them. Personally, I would err towards the Olympus. I do tend to like the Olympus build quality. So that takes care of primes that you could use and the zooms. There are other zooms on the market, and as I said a little bit earlier, I didn't mention the Lumix, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial on this, but it is very small amount of controversial. Lumix have the 12 to 35 and 35 to 150, I think it is. 35 to 150, I think it is that one, as their f2.8 Pro Series lenses. And again, they are absolutely knockout lenses. They really are knockout lenses for me. My problem comes just as to where the cutoff point is, the 35mm part. I find that extra 5mm from the Olympus take me to effectively an 80mm on the full frame equivalent. It just gives me that little bit extra reach in my working part. So I find I have to change the lenses too much with the Lumix, whereas I can stick to one lens longer. If I'm doing mainly headshots and upper body shots, the Lumix is slightly better actually, because it's a little bit more in its range. It's away from the extremities. But again, that f2.8 fixed aperture across on either the Olympus or the Lumix are great. My personal choice is the 12 to 40. I reviewed it, you'll find a link up there, reviewed the Mark 1 version of that in December. There's a Mark 2 version out which has not a huge amount of difference on it, a few different coatings and things. But if you have the 12 to 35 or the 35 to 100 f2.8, if you've got either of those lenses, don't feel as if it's inferior. Anything but. That lens, those lenses are equally as good as the Olympus lenses in the Pro Series range, in my personal opinion. Price wise, they match fairly well. The Olympus 12 to 40 is slightly lower, I think, in price. Try and get the newest version of each of them. There's been at least 2 versions of the Lumix lenses, and they give some better working when you come to using with the IBIS and the cameras. So it is worth getting the Mark 2 if possible. But again, if you have a Mark 1, don't worry about it. You still get a fantastic portrait and people lens. So yes, my overall choice of lenses for professional work, when you're doing portraits or people work or headshots, anything like that, for what I do, tends to be the Olympus 12 to 40 f2.8 zoom and the 75mm f1.8 fixed prime lens from Olympus. If you really want to get a little bit in between, you could maybe go for the 60mm macro f2.8 lens. You're not getting the speed that you've got on the 75, that's one problem, but it is a little bit of a smaller lens, and it is dual function being the macro, and it's a superb lens in itself. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have, don't forget to subscribe, hit the button below and give me a big thumbs up, and leave comments. I really do read your comments. I don't always reply to comments because the comments I don't see is directed just for me. They're directed for everybody to read, but I always read every comment that I can, and I always try to respond to the really interesting ones. And if you can leave a comment or a big thumbs up, that also helps the channel to spread to more and more people. I have to ask for it every time, but YouTube relies on it to get these videos out. However, whether you leave me a like or subscribe or not, really doesn't matter, so long as you keep taking your camera out and keep on having fun with your photos. Till the next time, see ya. Bye bye.